Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Monday, March 23rd. Madam Clerk, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chairman? Anytime you want to make it up here.
I'm sorry.
You know, if there's other times to socialize, I mean,
I know, that thing called work gets in the way every now and again.
on the agenda for tonight, we have a joint meeting with the Economic Development Committee and all the work they've done. They'll have a presentation for us, a reading of mail followed by input from both the public and from members. After that, it's a master plan update steering committee with interviews and appointments. 7:30, Personnel Board has two different topics, personal bylaw amendments and a policy introduction for workforce development. Public hearing at 8 o'clock, Act 3, 529 King Street for an entertainment license. After that, we have talking about our annual and special town meetings, determine the order of articles, refer zoning articles to the planning board, adopt article recommendations. And under the section, town administrator and assistant town administrator for finance and budget, Chapter 61, a waiver of first right on a property at 1 Wilderness Road. And after that, consent agenda and minutes, followed by executive section that deals with collective bargaining. Mr. Bergman?
First is the Economic Development
Oh, yeah,
Committee joint meeting.
that's right. I'm so used to going the other way. There's two meetings in a row, didn't there? I turn it over to you to introduce your committee and to make your presentation.
Tonight, we have Ed Coy-Handel here, Scott Lewis, John Bergeron, Paul Glavy, and that's it. And who's not here, Joe Prendeville, Neil O'Leary, Lisa Flanagan, and Ian Emery. We're going to, there's a lot of, you've probably gone through and seen there's a lot of information here. What we'd like to do is go through our presentation. If there's something critical, stop us. But we think it's going to be about 20 minutes to get through all our slides. And then we can open up and we can have a bunch of back and forth dialogue. I'm going to pass it over to Scott. He's going to kick it off.
We'll be as efficient as we can. There's a lot of information, and as you know, we provide some additional documents. There's some appendix slides. There's the raw data from the Google survey, which is a little bit hard to read, especially if you print it, but we want you to have it all, even though we're going to summarize some of the things here. So, thanks for your time tonight. As we know, we were here last time, we said this is what we've researched and we've been learning, and we'd really like to survey the citizens before we wrap this up, and we'll make some recommendations. And so that's what we're here to do tonight, is make those recommendations and also talk a little bit about what we learned in the surveys. Just as a background for those that don't recall or those that might be watching and didn't see this in the past, the mission is to proactively focus the town of Littleton on avenues for business growth. I always wanted to be on Looney Tunes.
That's supposed to come on at the end.
No pun intended.
I was kind of thinking, was that a setup there?
People on TV wonder who it is.
It's my daughter.
Oh, okay.
Warner Brothers is on the other line. There's a copyright question. So we'll increase and diversify the tax base through economic development consistent with community character. So when we met last, we said that we believed that Littleton needs to market what we have first and foremost. And this is something that's a little bit different between what we're going to tell you tonight versus some past economic development findings. Overall, what we found was very consistent with what we found in the past when we studied economic development in Littleton. But some of those things take a long time, or they're hard to act on, or they're hard to even get off the ground. We want to take a little bit of different tack this time and look at some things that can be acted on quickly, in addition to reiterating those old points. So we'll talk about both. But we did, in our initial study, we did some research, and you can argue about the fine points and percentages and numbers, but more or less, taxes have grown as fast or faster than home values and per capita and household income in Littleton over the years. And those that have been in Littleton a long time, you know, that tax bill gets bigger and bigger, and they have a harder and harder time staying in a town that they love very much and have been in a long time. And for that and many other reasons, you know, we don't want to lose services. We want to keep the quality of life and the character that we have in our town. And so economic development is a necessary ingredient for us to look at. And rather than letting development find us and fight development that really doesn't fit here, we wanted to pursue a decided growth strategy of development that's consistent with the character of the town, so that we can make it easier to sustain living here and increase the appeal even potentially to the residents, but do so in a way that fits. And so our core objective hasn't really changed from the beginning of when we outlined our mission to you, which was tax and revenue stability for the town with predictability and affordability for the taxpayers. And as we said in the beginning, we wanted to be data-driven. That's why we did the survey we did and some of the other research. And so we were formed as a committee really, once you accepted the mission we proposed, our mission was really to do some research and come back and make some recommendations. And we sought to do that with data. We wanted to understand how the town's finances were and what the fiscal projections looked like. We wanted to listen to the community. So we did a survey. It was actually pretty successful as these things go. We got enough responses on the survey to have a 5% margin of error and 90% confidence interval, which isn't easy to do when you're a volunteer-led group trying to reach citizens in today's world where there's not one path to communicating with them. But we did pretty well. And so we know that from the survey and from other conversations that preserving Littleton's character is important to the community. Our conservation space is highly valued. Our library and our schools matter to our citizens. And we think we should build on these strengths. And so we're pragmatic, not pessimistic. We're focused on meaningful, productive opportunities. And we want to balance who Littleton is with what Littleton needs. I think you probably heard me say that last time I was here. We've tried to stick to that. So on to the recommendations. First recommendation is we've done a lot of research. We've done some surveys. We've gone out and talked to businesses and residents, and we've met with the Board of Selectmen a couple of times. And we think it's time to transition the Economic Development Committee's primary activities from researching and advising to somebody's got to do something. And so it's time for action and evolving the Economic Development Committee to one oriented around executing a strategy and a plan from one that was going to advise and recommend things that would be in such a strategy and plan. Is a necessary step. And that could be us in a new form. It could be a joint committee made up of members of multiple boards that exist in the town. There's a number of ways you could choose to pursue that, but it's time to flip a switch, we think, from researching to starting to do. And so we're going to present some near-term as well as some medium-term ideas. As I said earlier, we did have findings that were pretty consistent with past economic development findings. Parking, sewers, the lack of amenities, the things we've all heard before. And those are still important, and you'll hear them a couple of different ways. But we also wanted to look at some really near-term things we could act on quickly. And so in addition to evolving to an execution role, there's a need to institute a program to better educate the community. One of the things that was interesting in our work was when you say economic development, people assume you're going to build a lot of buildings. They only hear the word development. They don't necessarily understand what economic development is. But there's also a lot of misunderstandings about the situation in the town and the impact of things like the Point, whether that's already in the projections that people are looking at and reading about in the Independent lately and things, or is that magic money that we haven't quite found yet, and when it shows up, it's going to solve everything. And the opinions are across the board based on what we heard and found. So as we evolve the Economic Development Committee, there's a couple of roles we can play. We were talking casually earlier. One of the things we should do is make sure we put someone in as a nominee to participate in the master planning process, because economic development is a pretty important part of master planning. And we also think whether or not we're part of that process, as in terms of having a member on that team, we're happy to offer the data from our survey to that process as well, because we think there's some important lessons in there and preferences that the residents have. We also think that it would be useful to have a staff role or department role included to either include new responsibilities, or if they're already there and we don't know about it, to amplify responsibilities around proactive development. And so that could be done with a staff person having those responsibilities. It could be done by contracting an agency or a person to help out. And there's a number of scales you could consider. So at a minimum, we think it's really important to invest in a one-time program to develop content for the website and other marketing materials to help us better promote Littleton. There's a lot to sell Littleton on right now to prospective businesses that could come here, and there's more that will happen over time. At the other end of the spectrum, you could go big and make it somebody's whole job to do economic development for Littleton. If you choose to go down that path, our only suggestion is let's make sure we do a little research on the ROI and make sure it's going to more than pay for itself. If you're going to tie up a fully loaded cost of a person, then there's you'd want to get a couple of times over in benefit to the town, right? So the survey responses I mentioned made it clear that there's not a consistent understanding a lot of things. I mentioned the point in economic development, but even the way the tax levy works. People think if we could just fill up the vacant space, all our problems would be solved, and unfortunately the math doesn't exactly work that way. Not that filling the vacant space is a bad thing, it's actually a really important thing. So we recommend some internal to Littleton marketing before and along with external marketing to prospective businesses. Develop and execute an informational strategy to better explain the financial reality, the trade-offs, our financial forecast, and what economic development is and what the options are, as well as cost-saving options. So people know what they're dealing with. A lot of citizens are making emotional decisions, and I'm not telling you anything you guys don't know from the job that you do here, but they're really not aware of all the realities underneath what some of these proposals and suggestions are. There's a very common assumption, and in fact we saw some write-in answers in our survey. Let's wait and see what the revenue from the point does and then figure out if we need any development. Well, we actually already know that that math is in there and it doesn't solve all of our problems. Right? And so there's an opportunity there to perhaps communicate some more information. So our first real action externally is to immediately create a Doing Business in Littleton page on the website. A lot of other towns have these. We mentioned it last time we were here, but we didn't want to, we were making formal recommendations last time we were doing a status update. So we're finishing the job now. And this is an opportunity to make it easier to find the contacts, the policies, the forms necessary to do business with the town. But also, more importantly, perhaps, to promote doing business in Littleton and include marketing content that would explain why we're a good place to locate your business. And that's not just because people are coming to the website to read that and we can sell them on Littleton. It's also because one of the things we learned in talking to a number of agencies and outside parties is probably the most important thing from an economic development perspective is making sure we get found when somebody's looking. Preferably somebody that we would want to have here. So explaining who we are and what's good about us would actually tend to attract the kind of businesses we would want here. And all that content on the website, in addition to being nice to read when you actually find it, optimizes search so that people might actually find us. The reality of the process, as we've come to understand, is by the time we're having a conversation with somebody that might come to Littleton, they're really far down their process. Right? The stuff they did in advance to search for a town to locate their business involved web searches and perhaps some state agencies or private companies that help with that sort of thing. And they're also doing web searches. And if we're not coming up in those searches, we may not get the opportunity to have the conversation at all. And if we do, they may already have some pretty biased ideas about where they want to be before they ever heard about us. And it might not be here. And so there's a number of reasons why having that content is important. And amongst that, we've got some great businesses in town. So one of the ways we can promote ourselves is to make sure we're bragging about who's already here. And just as an example, and I'm not going to go through this in any detail tonight, you're welcome to follow the link that's in your handouts if you want to read it yourself. Southborough's done a nice job with a guide to Southborough from an economic development perspective that is, it's advertising supported because they do a nice printed version of it, and we're actually suggesting Littleton not go down that path right now. We think a nice PDF you can download from the website would be more than sufficient for the early going here. And so that would suggest we don't need to get a bunch of people to sponsor printing an expensive to print color document necessarily. And so if you look through theirs, one of the things, actually you guys can't see it because of the way that I'm mirroring. I'm not going to switch to it. If you look through their guide, you'll notice it's just littered with advertisements because that's how they paid to make this really nice guide. But buried in it, there is some nice content. There's greetings and welcome to the town of Southborough. And there's pages about what it's like to live in Southborough, and there's pages about the schools and the environment and things like this, as well as who's in town as businesses now, because of course one of the ways you get businesses to your town is because they want to partner with the businesses that are already there. And so something along those lines, but on a more modest scale that's more web-oriented, we think would make a lot of sense for Littleton. Moving to a little bit more about the content, I'm not going to read everything that we suggest that gets put onto this website, but we have put a fair amount of thought into a starting set of content we can use for this, and then we can build more over time. So to market Littleton's strengths on the website, we can feature things like, we know some of these are strengths that have attracted other businesses. We're at 2 and 495, a pretty good location to be if you need to move goods around. But also we have a pretty educated workforce, not just in Littleton, but in the region. We actually have some pretty good other geodemographics that can be used to convince people this is a good place for a business. And so one of the things that we saw was Mass Econ works with Zoom Prospector, who provides a lot of this kind of data. And they have graphs and tables of numbers that they put behind the pages of every property they feature. But if you go to that site and you look for properties available to locate your business in Littleton, right now there's one. And it's been there a really long time. I don't know why nobody's interested in it, but it's over on Taylor Street. And none of our other empty spaces are listed there. So one of our challenges is how do we work together with the business owners in town to make sure that there's a place you can find out about available businesses in Littleton. One of the advantages of making sure it's listed on a site like this is when they go and they see about the property, there's these tabs right behind it that are about the workforce. They're about the consumer spending in the area, and so on and so forth, so that you can go in and say, hey, I would want to put my business there, not just because I kind of like the price and the square footage of this property, but holy cow, look at that workforce. It's got all the kinds of educated people I need for my business. Or if it's more of a retail kind of operation, you go to the next tab that says consumer spending, and they're buying the stuff I make. Of course I'd want to be there. So it's a nice combination of content to market. And then, all the other things we talk about in town and can be proud of, the rural character, but with some modern amenities. We've got some great accolades in the press. Best place to raise kids from Bloomberg 2 years ago. Best place to live from Boston Magazine last year. Right, we've got some good things going on from a green community perspective with some of our buildings and some of our policies. We've got the commuter rail and the reverse commute opportunities. We've got the lowest electric rates in the state, as far as I know. Actually, I think we checked that for sure. That's factual. So there's a lot we can do there. Also, from the survey, we learned some of the things that the residents want to have in town that aren't in town now. We also learned some of the things that residents want but don't want in Littleton. So we have both of those, and there won't be any big surprises there. But as a result of knowing what Littleton residents wish they could buy right here at home, we have some more content we can use to attract businesses to town. And so that's useful as well for the marketing. Now, some things that'll take a little longer and are obviously bigger to bite off and work on. We think it would be useful to re-engage the sewer committee. But basically what we think we learned is that the sewer committee work has kind of had the pause button pressed and it's sitting there. And they got pretty far, but they didn't finish. And yet a lot of the things that the residents are asking for in the surveys and that the business owners that want to grow are suggesting are holding them back have to do with not enough sewer or septic capacity around the common. And so we ought to at least finish that work and know what we're dealing with there. Enough citizens and businesses support the idea of sewers in the common also that I think it's worth pursuing that. What I would say, and it says this later in the presentation as well, the citizens are not against sewers in the common, but they're worried about who pays for it. And they're worried about the scope. And so I think that there's some work that needs to be done there again around communications, but it's kind of important to some of the kinds of businesses. Now, I don't want to say that we're anti-TIF, but one of the things I think we learned as we did our research was that the tax incentive financing, you're going to get asked for it, and it can be a powerful and important tool, but it's not going to differentiate a town. Too many other towns also do TIFs. And so it's not the thing that's going to make Littleton a better choice necessarily in the search process. It might help break a tie further down the process if we're more generous than somebody else, certainly when you think about negotiations. But we think that it's important to have some uniquely Littleton offers as well. And so a TIF is something that a number of towns can offer, but there's things that we can do that are a little bit different, both from things that are already our strengths and new incentives we might come up with. And the Light Department is amenable to a conversation about offering rebates, for example, to businesses that come to town and fill vacant spaces. We've got space there now, it's hooked up to the electric grid already, and nobody's consuming electricity and paying for it. There's something we can do there to make those more attractive. Final thing here, from an economic development perspective, less about marketing in this case, although it's about being easy to do business with, is just to keep making government zoning bylaws and permitting friendly and efficient. What I would say from comparing to a couple other towns is that our laws and policies are actually, they're okay, they're in pretty good shape, but navigating them is still sometimes complex and unpredictable to businesses. And a lot of the input on that is from write-in answers and anecdotal conversations. But I noted in a planning board meeting the other night, there was a mention of several Littleton businesses have an interest in forming a business association. That was actually written in on some of the survey responses as well. What a great opportunity, perhaps, as a place to have a dialogue to dig into what maybe some of the specific challenges and opportunities for improvement might be. We can also do things with our existing boards and committees. For example, let's ask the planning board or the zoning board of appeals, what are the 10 most common reasons a hearing gets continued? And I've noticed in some of those meetings that they're really good at helping make sure that when they come back the second time, they hopefully won't have to come back a third time. But what could we maybe document and share that would help them get it right the first time and not have to come back the second time? And those are the kinds of content that could also be useful to businesses. And when we compare Littleton to some other towns, one of the things that's interesting is, I'm a marketer, if that hasn't become apparent already. And in marketing, we say perception is reality. So there's a lot of great things about Littleton, but they're not all perceived that way. When you look at some other towns, it's easy for a town like Southborough, which was one of the ones we studied, to claim game over, come live with us because we're the best place you should put your business because of something like a low single tax rate. And they'll point at a town like Littleton and say they've got a split tax rate and they couldn't possibly make the commercial one more expensive. So why would you want to go there? And we all know there's more to it than that when you do the math, right? Square footage in Littleton's less expensive than Southborough. So when you do the whole math, it may or may not be more expensive to be here. Is the nature of your business need to be on Route 2 or on Route 90? There's a lot of questions that go into that. But when you position that, it can be an obstacle from a marketing perspective. So what Southborough likes to say is interest in Southborough remains strong due to a consistently low single tax rate, public water, and the town's reputation for providing predictable and efficient regulatory processes. They're committed to respecting developers. Most of that Littleton can say too. And some of it we could still say, but we have to say it a little bit of a different way because of what the realities are in our town. And so I think as we look at what our marketing content is, what's the phrase like that Littleton can use? I mentioned talking to the businesses in town specifically around what are the opportunities to make it easier from a process perspective, but also just in general, the businesses wrote in that they're interested in having more of a conversation about how we develop Littleton together, and they're willing to help. So let's take advantage of that. And if they're thinking about having a business association, perhaps the town could get together with the businesses once or twice a year in a roundtable type setting or a breakfast type setting where we can talk with each other, but also perhaps sometimes bring in a guest speaker that everybody can learn from, and it maybe catalyzes the conversation afterwards. One of the bigger ideas in terms of, we're not doing anything like this now, but it's an interesting concept that we came up with, was to explore the possibility for a startup incubator or an accelerator program, or even just a shared workspace like a makerspace or shared office space for entrepreneurs. But we were exploring the idea of what would it mean to grow our own instead of trying to go find businesses and attract them here. And so some people wrote in, hey, why don't you get a satellite campus for a college here? Well, that seemed like a hard thing to do, but an interesting idea, but there's a long payback period. And we came across this idea and thought, well, what if we branded something like this as Neshoba Valley, not just Littleton, to draw in business and financial support from the region, partner with maybe an owner of one of the empty spaces in town to get a favorable rent to have some space to do this in, and then maybe get some of the businesses around here to participate, either as a host or as a sponsor of some sort, or even seek grants to potentially fund it. If you're not familiar with these programs, they have pretty low overhead in terms of staffing. There's usually a director and one or two full or part-time support staff, and everything else is volunteers. I'm one of about 40 mentors at the Entrepreneurship for All up in Lowell, for example, which mentors startups in the area. And I'd love to drive 5 minutes across Littleton instead of 20 minutes up there or longer, depending on time of day, to do my mentoring. But there's a lot of business people who would love to share what they know to help these new businesses get off the ground. And then if the new businesses are successful, they become taxable businesses in Littleton. The other thing that was interesting in the mentorship program was this guy that's running a food truck because he doesn't want to be in Boston. He's doing it out in Merrimack Valley because there's a lot less competition. I was thinking, well, Littleton has a sewer problem. How do we feed the businesses in our town and solve that amenity problem? Maybe we need somebody with a food truck or more food trucks coming to our businesses. So the other thing here is what businesses and industries do we want here, and how do we make sure that we specifically get the word out to them once we do have this marketing content? And that's a targeting process. We learned some things from the residents, and I'm going to talk about the survey findings in just a moment that'll help answer that question. I mentioned grants earlier, so we can pursue grants to help fund some of these programs potentially. And one of the things we would suggest is that together we can prioritize from all these interesting ideas what will we actually go do when, right? And once we know what those are, we'll have a better idea of what kind of grants might or might not be in play. We also think teaming with similar towns is a good idea, but you have to be a little bit careful. If there's one grant to fund one program and Littleton and Westford both want to do that program, we can't team with them. But if we're going to do a regional accelerator program and we're going to ask them to play with us, then more is good, actually, in terms of attracting funding, getting businesses involved, et cetera. But there could be other things that we choose to do where actually there's no harm, no foul, and there's a lot of good from teaming with neighboring towns because there's a common interest in the content that would be developed or the program that would be launched. And then engaging the regional and state organizations for economic development and marketing assistance is really important. These are the guys that are getting the questions. I mentioned that Mass Econ site. When you go to that site and you search for available office space and you put in, I need so many square feet, I need this kind of zoning, et cetera, there's very few Littleton properties showing up right now. And so how we make sure that we are in those systems is an important question. But there's a lot of agencies we could be dealing with. Mass Development, the Office of Business Development, Mass Econ, the Small Business Development Center, all the different chambers of commerces in the area. We have an interesting challenge. If you go to that Mass Econ site, for example, we kind of sit on the edge of about 4 different regions, the way they regionalize Massachusetts, and it makes it really hard to know where to find us, or for us to get found, more importantly. So maybe we can also lobby them to think differently about how they regionalize as a longer-term goal. But I would suggest we need to prioritize which of those can help us solve the problem we want to solve, which is primarily getting found and getting sites in Littleton suggested, rather than try to divide our energies across so many different agencies. And then leverage them to promote Littleton. There could be non-governmental agencies as well. We talked to a couple of companies, the aid companies, when they're doing their site searches as part of our research. Those are non-governmental organizations that are for hire to help companies do that. But a lot of times when they go do their research, they're doing web searches and they're going and asking places like Mass Econ if they're looking for a place in Massachusetts. So I think let's start there, make sure our data is in the world to be found, and then we can work downstream and start to try to reach out to the ones we think are doing searches around here. So quickly, I want to highlight a couple of things from the resident survey and the business survey. This will be really fast stuff here because if I read it all to you, we'd be here for a very long time, as you saw in the handout materials. There's some things in here, I guess a broad statement. This is a survey of what the residents had to say. So messenger, voice of customer, don't shoot. But also don't take this as overly critical necessarily. It's this is learning opportunity for all of us to see what people perceive, as I mentioned earlier, whether or not it matches the reality. And when it doesn't match, we have a communications opportunity. But some of these things we know, we hear them on the floor at town meeting, we hear them with people that write you letters. There's a notable, but not majority, number of residents that took the time to write that they'd rather see us cut spending more than do development. Not really a surprise when you're looking at this kind of a survey, but enough of them said so that I wanted to make sure you knew they said so. So I wouldn't call it a majority. There's an interest in mixed use in properties in the common and the surrounding areas, and that was mentioned by both residents and businesses answering the survey. Again, not in gigantic numbers, but enough to be worth noting. And there's some of those projects, going through the zoning process right now, actually, so there's a little bit of that going on. But I don't think it's the kind that was envisioned based on the write-in answers. There's a common misperception that the point has more impact than the town has forecast. This last one is, you may be able to even guess who some of the people are that wrote that in, because some of them say this very often in town, but that doesn't mean it's invalid. It actually is important to know that not everybody thinks that we listen. Some of them had some not so nice things to say about economic development when they answered the survey too. They thought we already knew what the end game was before we ever asked them the question in some cases. So important to know. And not the scope of economic development though, so we're not recommending a solution to that particular point. Most of the residents that went through and ticked off the kind of businesses they wanted to see in Littleton are interested in more dining options in Littleton. Of course, that comes back to the sewer question in a lot of ways. But also a majority of people were interested in sewering, but they had these concerns about who paid for it, and even more importantly, who paid for it later again if it broke. And we've heard that in some of the citizen forums in the past in the sewer study and so forth as well. Suffice it to say that there's a number of things Littleton residents do shop for in town, and there's a number of things they shop for elsewhere, but they're spending most of their money outside of town. Not a big surprise, there's a lot more businesses outside Littleton than there are in Littleton for general goods spending, but some of that might be capturable back here in town. When you correlate that with what they want to get in Littleton, you find that restaurants, coffee shops, bookstores, clothing stores, restaurants, crafts and galleries, a food co-op, things like that show up on the want list, and all the things you'd expect show up on the not want list. They don't want nightclubs, tattoo parlors, gambling, casinos. They don't want more car dealerships. Not a lot of big surprises here, but it's nice to know that it statistically has been measured. From a strengths and weakness perspective, affordable electricity, the small town feel, open space, natural environment, the school system, the library, the lake, the general low density nature of the town, these things bubble to the top as strengths. And the challenges residents think we have, too dependent on taxing the residents. Everybody, not everybody, but a number of people seem to have coalesced around this notion that more development is more expensive, puts more kids in the schools, uses more water, et cetera. And so they don't want more development, and they're happy to say so. Pedestrian and bicycle concerns, we've got some roads that have some challenges, probably more so after this past winter. And the most common challenge that was written in was government and politics. Now, sadly, it's the nature of a survey is that's what was written. I've sort of summarized in 3 words there, but when you dig in and read all the detailed responses that caused me to list that there, you won't know a lot more about what they meant than what that says. If I knew, I would tell you, but I don't want to put words in the citizens' mouths. So we asked them, okay, we got all these challenges, what should we do about it? And these were some of the top answers: cut spending, educate the public more. And the education answer was really about helping them make better decisions at the polls and in town meeting. So when you're going to, and we were right on the heels of the artificial turf thing at the last town meeting when we did this survey, right? So they didn't say it was about the artificial turf thing, but I'll use that as a convenient example. A lot of the discussion about it was, well, what's it going to cost us over 10 years? What's the maintenance on that look like? And people felt like you were telling them what it cost up front, but not telling them what it costs the town for the long haul. The general version of that was we saw remarks saying, tell me what things cost now and in the future, right? So before I vote on it, I really know what I'm voting on. Business, parking, sewers, limit development, things that you'd expect to hear there. When we asked them what they thought we should do with land downtown, around the common, they're interested in retail and restaurants. It's an interesting challenge because it is kind of where we think of in town for that sort of thing, and it's a kind of a gathering place to a degree. It's not a terribly safe area for pedestrians, just because the nature of where parking is and where the businesses are, and the amount of traffic on those 2 roads, but it's a natural use to expect there. Better architectural quality or landscaping in the commercial developments. I have to tell you, I think this answer is guilty of multiple choice answer bias. It was one of the answers they could choose, and a lot of them chose it. But when you look at the entrances to Littleton, depending on which way you're coming in, I'm not sure which commercial developments we're talking about, because there aren't that many on the ways in. Now, in some of our other sections of town, there's opportunity maybe to make the buildings look better. And of course, if you're going to do industrial and commercial uses, put them where the industrial and commercial already is. Common finding there. Business survey. Just to know, on the business survey, there's not a lot of businesses in Littleton. There are more than I actually thought there were. But as a result, we got a pretty good percentage of businesses answering the business survey, but it's not a very large number of businesses. So use that grain of salt when you consider this. But they were pretty consistent with each other, so at least it's a somewhat unified opinion. And so we asked them the barriers or obstacles to expanding your business. We asked them a number of things. This is one we chose to highlight here. Commercial tax rate was a common response. Lack of rentable space. And I assume that means not just square footage that's available, but the right kind of square footage in the right place for their business. And a number of the businesses that answered, if you read between the lines, you could tell were businesses around the common. And it is hard to expand there. Septic and sewer and lack of parking goes right back to what I just said. So to wrap it up, We don't want Littleton to become completely unaffordable to people that have been here for a long time, but we don't have to cut all of our services to solve that problem. So we think a little bit of economic development is a good thing, and we think that attracting the kinds of businesses that are most compatible with Littleton to come grow with us is a better solution than waiting to see who shows up and deciding if we really wanted them to show up or not and trying to fight it. And so economic development's about a lot of things. Our intent here has been to try to understand how Littleton can grow, and one of the things that we decided was that really the right place to start is marketing the strengths we already have. There's a lot to be proud of here in Littleton and a lot that's attractive to businesses. We can start marketing that right away. Then we can build on some of these other things, whether it's sewers or parking or other longer-term projects. So the most effective path forward is a bias towards action. We'd like to see some work done on getting some of this content built and getting some web pages done and so forth sooner than later. And then perhaps over a longer term or even as part of the master planning process, we can look at some of those bigger steps as whatever makes the most sense here in the town. Now, we know that we touched on a number of things here that could concern a number of the boards and committees in town, and we'd be happy to present to them too if you'd like us to or they'd like to hear from us. Certainly you can pass the information along to them. And we're happy to answer questions. I know we're tight on time right now, but we can answer questions now quickly if you want. We can certainly answer questions on an ongoing basis.
At first, I want to take the opportunity, I think the whole board wants to thank you and the committee for the work that's done. Certainly know the time that goes into something like this, and the last thing we want to do is have all your work get shelved and put away. And I think one of the key things you said was, you had the slide up there, you said change it to execution. I think it's key, because we've all done this before, we've seen the plans come into place, and they do get twist, and you're bringing up some of the same things, but you have a lot of brand-new ideas that I absolutely love. And I want to turn over to the board, because I have some questions too, but if anyone wants to start. There we go.
You really want me to start? Okay.
I'm just going to
First
sit
off-
down while you ask so we can all participate.
First off, tremendous amount of work. A lot of things going on, and this is a difficult subject to tackle because there are people on all sides of this, and some of them are not going to change their mind. But I do have some questions, and I probably have so many that I'm going to have to write this stuff to the committee and maybe come to the committee and talk, so I'll just touch on a few of them. But I'll start with some of the, as I looked through the surveys and tried to put that together, I was surprised at the positives that came out. In some of the things, we were, attract skilled workers was low at 38%. Now, what I did is I added percentages, average and up, and below average, because obviously we want to take a good, long, hard look at what our negatives are to make them into positives. But, for instance, housing options for executives. 74% of your surveys were average or above for that. Good place to establish and maintain retail, 61% average and above. Compared to other communities, 74% average and above. So, there's a lot of positives to build on. One of the things that you said was that this is data-driven and that you're 90%, you have a 90% plus or minus 5% confidence rate. And you had a total of 256 residential respondents, which is around 3%, and 15 businesses. And I don't know what the percentage.
Okay, so first of all, the 90% and 5%, to be clear, was on the resident survey.
Okay.
That wasn't on the business survey. The business survey would be close, but not quite there because of the small number of responses on the business survey. The resident survey was taking the 256 as representative of households, not people. And so when you take 256 as a percentage of the households in town and you run it through any sample calculator for a survey, you'll get those numbers.
Okay. So that's roughly about the number of people that show up at a town meeting.
Yes, but interestingly, I'm not sure it was the same people.
No, probably not.
Some definitely, but.
Some people speak up more freely in the survey than they do in other circumstances. So the point I'm trying to make is that, and this is generally, it's not just your committee, we're not engaging enough people in this discussion. We're not bringing the townspeople into deciding the future of this town. 3% should not decide for everybody else. Now, that's part their fault, and that's part our fault. And in order to take on something like this, or the master plan, or anything like that, we have got to do better. And I would ask you to do the same. You've got to get out to more people and hear what they have to say. And it's how you do it, that's the hard part. But you're the marketing executive, so you should be able to
Well,
do better.
as a
at that.
marketer, I'm delighted with that survey response. That's a pretty high percentage. But I understand what you're saying.
Well, you know, we're government. We're supposed to be doing carrying out the business of the people.
Right, well, so what
And
those
if we're not in touch
statistics,
with the people, we have a hard time carrying it out properly.
absolutely. What those statistics suggest, statistically, is that with a 5% margin of error, that represents what every person in town would tell you. And that's, as a marketer, that's why I like the numbers, but I understand your concern.
So I want to go to another point that was, you know, and I've read as many of those surveys as I could get through. You know, trying to accommodate the way the PDF was and what was duplicate and what wasn't and so forth. And the part I'm perplexed about is that I think 5 times here, you've brought up the need to address the sewering issue. And yet I only saw 3 responses in the surveys that said sewering was an issue.
Those are in the write-in responses?
Yes.
So there was also a quantifiable response that had to do with sewers. And that's where the majority came in.
So I just want to make sure that this is, again, where I think the connection to the community is important. Do they want this? I don't know whether they want this or not. But it concerned me that we were hearing all about sewering, and I didn't see anything in all the data you collected that was supporting people saying, we want sewering. And in the business, there was one response,
Right.
and that was from engineers, and that's perfectly understandable that engineers in the business would see that. And like I said, I have pages of stuff that I like to have dialogue with. We don't have the 2 hours necessary to do that, so I think I'll probably stop there.
Well,
And thank you. Indeed, there's a lot of work. You can just see it all here in the graphs, and you know that goes behind each and every one of the work you've been doing. So again, thank you. Scott, you answered a really important question too, with the statistical fidelity of it all, because sometimes you see raw numbers and you go like, how valid is that? And we know, presidential polls, you're going about 500 or 600 people across the entire country, and they seem to be somewhat accurate. So your sense of confidence in this and giving your expertise in it is very helpful. Certainly, tax burdens on people is always going to be something that comes to the forefront. What I really like, too, is the communication. Alex hit on it, but I'll take it from a different angle on engaging folks, and that is how do we communicate what is going well, but then conversely, how do folks in town communicate to us what they think is not going so well. So there's a bit of a bilateral, I think, exchange that goes on there reasonably well, but not enough to meet the needs, certainly the desires of folks sitting at this table, I should think. So this is a real good first step. You mentioned the Littleton Business Association. That's actually an ongoing concern, whole 2 meetings now, but something that has begun. So it begins to address something that folks have identified, and certainly some businesses. And it's not from a sense of, what is good for my business. And certainly, we're all going to have our own selfish motives on what we try to do each and every day. But there's also the altruism in it, because if the concern in town is doing well, and it's staying in business, paying taxes, it's good for all of us in town. It's not the old GM mantra, if you remember, from many, many decades ago now. What's good for GM is good for America.
Yeah.
I don't put it in that context, but certainly what does well for business in town, and that is economic development. It begins to answer that residential tax burden issue that you brought up, where folks think there's too much burden on the individual residential taxpayer. So you're on the right road. Your suggestion, it seems like it's a volunteer statement even, and that is to go into an execution mode, I think is the way to go. And perhaps, discussions before too many more meetings go by, on what kind of guidance we may choose to offer the Economic Development Committee on how to go about that.
Yeah, just by way of background, it's in the speaker notes as well, but as we did our research, some towns have actually gone as far as to make an execution-oriented committee, to write it into bylaw and put it at the town meeting. Other towns have made it an appointed committee, as we have been so far. So those are things you can consider. We didn't want to dictate the answer there. That's not our role.
But I did see your right hand go up, so thank you.
I'll echo what you've heard from the board members. Thank you. Great work. Couple things that really jumped out at me, one being the whole web-based idea of getting our businesses out there. It's a great idea. I think the town does a nice job with their website, and to get that developed and get that information that you guys have researched out there, I think is going to be huge in dealing with the state and just to get us on the map, as you said earlier. Love the idea about one of your members getting on the master plan committee to deal with that huge project that's going to be kicking off too. I think that, when you get a response to these surveys, as you did, because the survey that I was involved with when we did the pay-as-you-throw, I was on the pay-as-you-throw, we didn't even get that much of a response. So to see those numbers, I was impressed also, to see that type of response that you get out of the residents of town. So I commend you for that. That's really good. Would have liked to seen a little bit better on the business side, but like you said, there's, that's difficult to do. I think.
Neil's not here tonight, but he knocked on 30 business doors.
Sure.
And got people who said they'd go take the survey, and they still didn't go take the survey.
Yeah. But I think that, the execution piece that you suggested is a fantastic next step, and part of that being is to really try to engage those businesses that are out there. Not only the ones that are active in town, but those vacant buildings in town too. And to really reach out and see what their needs are. But again, just the 20 minutes you spent here tonight, well, I can already see some improvements if we get going on the website and dealing with some of the businesses in town too, so, very good.
Okay, again, I'd echo what was said as well. Thank you, great job. It's really neat to get an inside look at the way people think and feel from business and personal perspective. So I've got a couple of questions on kind of the big next step, the marketing strategy to engage the right type of businesses that we want in town. So first question is, do we feel like we have agreement on what are the types of businesses that we want to attract to town?
I think we have content and data that can help drive a conversation around that. I don't know if we have finality on that by any means. So if you look at the businesses that the residents are interested in from the survey, I think that's a great catalyst for that conversation. I don't think it answers it entirely on its own. There's other things we have to consider. Do we have the infrastructure for certain of those types of businesses? Are they already happening? There's some things going in over at the point that might answer some of those. So then we prioritize elsewhere. So I think there's more conversation to be had.
I think that if you couple two of the answers together, one of them, which is where do you spend your money, that goes outside of Littleton, and what do you want in Littleton? Different questions, super high correlation. So if you look at those, people are looking to put those types of businesses in Littleton, and then therefore they would spend their money here. So I think that's an important connection to make, because they're different questions, they're almost mirror each other though.
But both of those speak to the retail component. There's also, we've had conversations, but I think, Scott accurately summarizes it as just a jump-off point for further conversations. What kind of industries are just growing, looking for places to locate? There's other communities that have become host communities for, I think the phrase that was used was incubator or accelerator. But if you identify a tech industry that's new, or a biological
Like
industry.
biotech.
Yeah, and then,
Kendall Square, right?
You size them up and you go after that industry rather than just a particular company, then you can become kind of a magnet for that. So that's, obviously we didn't flesh it out enough yet, but that's one of the things that we probably should be talking about in more detail.
Yeah, and that's alluded to, I think, in the written report that went with the presentation. So one of the ideas was, well, we've got the rail expanding, we've got the better train station. Maybe there's some of those exact groups that we're talking about here that started in Cambridge and want a cheaper, bigger place to expand.
Yeah.
come on out on the train. So there's things like that we could look at as well, but we haven't gone to the nth degree analyzing those and seeing, who's ripe to lure out here yet.
Okay, so maybe a parallel pronged attack at the marketing going, there's a lot of work there, and then shore up this definition a little bit, which actually also goes into the master plan and that's part of our vision of our town, so I agree, it would be good for one of you guys to be on the committee there. Okay, and then there's the second aspect of that, so attracting the right businesses, but then there's the flip side, and there's the concerns that the businesses raised, and how do we go about kind of categorizing those and seeing what we can do to overcome them, and I guess that's where you guys are probably headed with short-term versus long-term, is my guess, is taking a look at the challenges and seeing how we can either resolve them or improve them.
Yeah, clear, the reason that our recommendation, the actual action recommendation was to unpause the sewer committee and finish that work as
Yeah.
opposed to put in sewers,
Yep.
which would be a very different recommendation. So we didn't think we had all the answers there, but whether the data suggests that all the residents want sewers or not is sort of secondary to the fact that the businesses they want are the businesses that probably require sewers. And so we've got to finish that before we can answer some of these other questions. We can't say, let's put a bunch of restaurants around the common if we're never going to have sewers. So we have to finish that work and make some
Exactly.
decisions, and then we can make related decisions.
Yeah, I think that's smart, and that goes along with your other suggestion. It was something like top 10 reasons from the zoning board why things are delayed. I like that. That's a really good idea.
I use that as a placeholder example, but probably for every board and every committee, there's something like that we ought
Yeah.
to be examining, right?
I think that's smart. And about, what's the percentage of businesses? Was it like 25% that responded-ish?
It was less than that.
About 20, something like that? Okay.
I can get you the number and email it to you.
Just curious-ish, where, okay, no worries. Yeah, and then I think that's really it for me. I was curious how there was, as you guys all said, a lot of comments, and so how you sat there and combed through those and figure out, how to categorize them is something I'd probably be interested in, but I'm good for now.
I have a whole bunch of things I want to talk about, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to speak on a couple issues. I know going through some of the same things that you've gone through as a committee and trying to gather data and talk to people on how time-consuming and certain people have talents to go draw that out, then how do you make your presentations and bring it back? Because Ivan and Paul, I think you were on the board, and Alex, you might have been, when the Town Government Study Committee was, and we did that work, and I remember coming to a Board of Selectmen's meeting and having one of your colleagues at that time get up and start drawing circles on a board, and he had me more confused, and that committee who had done all the work, I remember going out in the room out there and saying, what was all that about? The reason I bring it up now is I think you have a consensus here of the people. This board is very impressed and with what you've done, and hopefully it gets carried forward. A lot of the things that you've touched on are things that I've been hearing recently. Being in real estate, I hear it, and being a new member of the Littleton Business Association, we've only had 2 meetings, but I see it as a organization that would love to have you come and speak at it. We started off with maybe 20 members on the first meeting, and in the second meeting, we probably had 25, but they were different people. So we probably had 30 to 40 different businesses in town, and it didn't include any of the big businesses. It was mostly medium-sized or smaller. And to hear, and the first 2 meetings were so wide open, let's get some ideas. A lot of things you brought up, they also talked about. I mean, they talked about a TIF. They talked about the split tax rate. And I've heard the split tax rate on the other side, on the business side, as I've heard Littleton is hard to navigate through. You have a split tax rate and that type of thing. So that perception's there, and we have to go out and use the website to try to change that around. You have that going. And I think, as Alex talked about the soaring, maybe it's because the business I am, or the location I'm in, I hear about sewer all the time. As far as, I can't put this business here because I can't grow, or I can't fit it in or anything. And it's happened, I don't know how many times, and people come to the comment. Just this past week, I have someone that's looking, still in Littleton, but in a different part of the town, because we think we found something, but the person wanted to be in this area, and he can't run that business. So I see it as something that maybe a certain group of people are afraid. I think so, as far as that goes, and we should get that sewer committee going again, and you're right, the pause button was put there.
It's a great way to put it.
And we have to take that off and get them going again, because they did a tremendous amount of work. And I think just having them reactivate and re-educate the people, because there's a lot of misconceptions on how that would run. And that's a whole subject I don't want to get into now, but there are some of those things out there that people say, I don't want it, but they don't understand, you know. And I still have to learn about it too, but once again, I'll bring up the execution part. I'd love to see either your committee or something formed that keeps on going, you know, get the spider going, it's going out in different directions, so we do bring back things to the town that can be helpful, good, clean business. And I think so far, you've done a tremendous start. And I'll talk to you guys later on about the possibility of meeting with the business association, because I think you've got a lot of great ideas there. And Neil probably worked his heart off, but he probably could have gone to one meeting and met as many people but no one knew that committee was being formed.
When I wrote the line about it on the slide, you hadn't met yet.
Yeah. And that's still in the infant stages, but I see that as being something positive too, so.
Do we, oh, excuse me.
Right.
Do we leave it for this evening with the committee that we ask them, you know, 'cause we all seem to think the execution arm of them coming to the forefront is a good idea, is to ask them to go forward and propose a plan on how they go about that?
I think it'd be a tremendous idea.
And to take that one step further is the compilation of that committee slash, so to have maybe a planning board member, a member of the Board of Selectmen. So now you start to engage the government side also to bring in, you know, kind of finish the pie. You got business, community, government, and
And that's, it actually says that in the speaker notes.
Sure.
I don't know if I said it out loud, but that was our suggestion, was that, you know, that you consider what boards should be part of that. Should that be a primarily board-formed thing with a couple of citizens, or should that be this committee with some more board involvement? But I think those are the questions to get from here to that execution phase.
I'll definitely say involve some board members, even the Board of Health, you know, those regulatory boards that really have a big impact on not only the business community, but also the residential community.
That can help to streamline the whole process as well, make Littleton way easier to do business in.
Absolutely.
And everybody has an understanding of what needs to happen. I think that'll lower the fear level, because I think what's happening, you know, especially on the common, is people just don't understand, and when they hear about development, they get a little nervous. They can't see what's going to happen. But in a lot of places where it has happened and it's been successful, those places are awesome. And I think the town common, especially the green, could be a space like that. But it needs to be done properly, and we need to really clear some of these hurdles so that we know what it can be, and then work forward from there.
So you have done case studies for towns that have implemented stuff like this?
I've been to towns that are very, very well done, and you can tell that they just don't happen by accident. Successful spaces don't happen by accident.
Again, it goes back to the proactive, reactive.
Yeah.
You know, you need people to put the time in to say, okay, this is what we want, how do we get there? Rather than wait for it to happen.
It happens on every scale. If you compare Lowell and Lawrence, much bigger scale than Littleton, but Lowell changed a lot faster and further than Lawrence has so far. Lawrence is doing some good things, but they're coming from a further place back to try to do those sorts of things now too. And you know, and we're not like those towns. That's why we looked at towns like Southborough and some other smaller towns. But you know, people chose a decided strategy and they followed it. And they may have learned some things on the way and done this as they learned them, but they kind of went in a direction.
And I think in terms of creating a plan for the town, those kind of case studies will be critical to help make people understand what goes into making successful places happen. Because it's all by a plan. It's gotta be worked out and planned out.
Once you have a plan, you can communicate that.
Right.
Too.
Yeah.
That's a big piece of it.
There's no question communication is the hardest challenge, and not just for what we're talking about here tonight, but for your jobs in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, there's not a single paper that everybody in town gets, not everybody goes to the website, you know, we don't have everybody's home email address in some town system. There's not one easy way to communicate with everybody, even to get the message to them, let alone whether they'd actually read it. And so it's not easy, but we have to use the mechanisms that we have available to us and keep building on them.
And Paul, if you can summarize it, because you said it good a minute ago, our next step to them is to have one people that, I don't know,
I'd say we ask them to make a proposal, develop a proposal on what might be the best way forward. As Scott said, maybe it's, some other government folks, some other boards, if that's the way you think, put your craniums together and come up with what you think is a solid plan and present it to us and, work for that endorsement and move forward that way.
So does that break off some of the pieces of what we suggested and to kind of come up with more details and start putting together? some
Yeah,
of the
because
pieces of that
as
puzzle?
Scott had begun his talk, he talked about, maybe transitioning, your
Execution.
second
Yeah.
slide.
Execution.
Work on the
Right.
execution plan.
Right.
So, exactly that.
Yep.
Right.
What's your proposal?
If we could come back with what some of the options are and a recommendation on the structure.
Yep.
And I think for execution, some of the key things that were in Scott's presentation that are gonna be important just from making anything happen is we're gonna need some sort of dedicated, reliable staff contact. It can't all be, if it's gonna be just done by volunteers, it'll fall apart as a result. So whether that's one or more people having different responsibilities. And two is a focus on the website, and we appreciate in advance how difficult it is, and Nancy's got a lot of, it can't just be dumped in her lap, but if we have to address that, we probably have to do something along those lines.
Well, to that end, the light department uses a different service than the town. And we were gonna reach out to that company, Web Design, to see if they've done some economic development type work. So we were thinking maybe a link on our current website to something else that is, the actual doing business in Littleton.
But present on the homepage.
But present on the homepage, yeah, as a link.
And Scott had mentioned return on investment also, and Paul just brought up, do we get some sort of staff? But before you get the return on the investment needs to be made.
Absolutely.
So-
You just have to have some confidence that what you're aiming it at has a return, right?
Yeah.
So we don't want to spend money for the sake of spending money.
Absolutely.
That
But I
would
think
be
you're
counter to
going-
our mission.
But you're kind of going down the right road. You're going to need some help, I think. And that may be part of your proposal too, when you come back. Is it 10 hours a week? That's just a number out of the air right at the moment. But something that you're going to need to kind of help that way too.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Chris.
you.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
She texts and say, at about 6:50, she texts and say, what time are we?
Moving on, Mr. Bergman, the mail.
Nels, real quick, there are additional Chapter 90 funds being made available to cities and towns for pothole and winter recovery efforts. Littleton's share of that will be $58,650, and the only catch is that we have to spend it by June 30. And that won't be a problem.
Hey, Keith, do they
Just a
take,
couple of other things
Keith,
that you've been,
sorry,
yeah.
do they take snowfall inches into consideration in
No,
that
they
math?
They
I
do
knew it
not.
was basic.
No, only miles.
I knew it.
Miles of accepted roadway.
Well, I
and
find that-
population.
That might be a factor they want to consider.
Not this time. It
No?
might factor into the way FEMA reimbursements come back for if there's storm monies. We received a notice today from the Department of Housing and Community Development that we are now at 12.56. That's up by a fraction of our percentage because our housing consultants found one unit that we have that wasn't counted. So in the analysis that they did of make sure all the deed restrictions and everything was in place, and so they got DHCD to count the additional unit. It's on the list, and so good for them. And lastly, right before this meeting, the Financial Policies Working Group met and unanimously recommended all of the recommendations that the committee had been looking at, and FinCom takes it up tomorrow night. We can have it on our agenda at our next regular meeting agenda, but it's a really comprehensive set of financial policy amendments, which want to single out Steve Venuti, the town treasurer, for all the work that he did in crafting the draft documents that the folks looked at. So Thank you, Steve.
Good work.
That's it.
Okay, moving on, public input, anyone?
Just one comment before.
Just identify yourselves.
I'm sorry. Mike Selden, 11 Luann Street. Before the Board of Selectmen gets all excited about the survey that was carried out by the Economic Development Committee, it was rather striking what I didn't hear, that their questionnaire was externally, I'll use the technical word, vetted by people who basically are expert in designing questionnaires for populations of our size. And it's a field that's been around, it's quite valid, it's been around for almost like 25 years. And just for fun, I only took it to one because I happened to have a friend who had 10 minutes. And I pulled the survey out and just sent it to him. I said, we were a population of 9,000, 6,000 registered voters, gave them sort of a profile of the town and asked the question where we were. And of course, they have access to data that we can only dream about, but in any event, this particular survey, at least by this one particular person, flunked. So in other words, it did not accurately reflect, except for one topic, and you're all going to love to hear this, the sewage system questions were in fact quite valid. And that is, there is a positive, that is the only inflection point they saw. The rest of them had to do with resistance to change. The questions were more philosophical rather than economic development in their focus. Now, I don't claim to be an expert. I just did this just to satisfy my curiosity. But it's a warning to me and to anybody else in town who attempts to undertake or take seriously surveys, that we ought to have our surveys externally vetted by folks who do this for a living and who are paid to do it. That is, who have some expertise in knowing how to design and evaluate questionnaires. So I'm not saying we should disregard the incredible work that was done by the committee. I would just say we ought to take any survey done in the town that isn't vetted with a big, big grain of salt, except for the sewage system.
I think that's a good point. And I, I guess it's something that, the first one's always the hardest, I guess this committee was put together. I know the Economic Committee, Development Committee had been, what, 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, or thereabouts? Yeah. So, now that we were bringing it up back to life, that would have been great information. We never budgeted any type of money for any type of survey.
Yeah, I'd like to make 2 points. I know the committee's kind of left, and I'm hanging around for another topic, but first of all, I wouldn't want to diminish Scott's professional expertise here. He is, in fact, a marketing professional who has been directly involved in soliciting community opinions on topics mostly in the business realm. And two, it wasn't intended to be a scientific poll. I mean, I've paid for and been involved in professional polls. I know what that's all about. This is a community survey questionnaire, and at some point we may want to pay bigger money or pay money period to have a different kind of product, but I don't think we were fooling ourselves or anyone else that what we were doing was anything but a solicitation of the community. I think the high level of response is probably as big a takeaway as you want to focus on.
All right, to the board, anyone?
No, right.
Was the warm weather.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Wow, move right along. On to the master plan update steering committee. This is actually started back in September when our board and the planning board got together. Right now, we have 2 members of this committee, 2 members of the planning board. We've selected 2 members already from citizens at large, and we've had, how many interests right now, Keith?
We have 3 applications. You've got 6 openings, 3 applications, and we had the pledge from the Economic Development Committee that they would have.
We have a
They would be
nominee by
bringing
name.
forward.
It's not a secret. We just haven't filled out your form yet. That's Ed Kuykendall, who was here earlier tonight. Ed is interested in representing the Economic Development Committee, and we've discussed it internally, and so he's our nominee there. I'm also haven't filled out the form, but I am personally interested in not representing anybody other than just having been an advocate for the master plan process.
Let's fill it up, hurry up.
I know, I didn't realize, I'm surprised that there's still vacancies at this stage of the game, so some of my responsibilities with the FinCom are, wrapping up. I'm not gonna be vice chair after the end of the fiscal year, I don't imagine. As Keith indicated, the Financial Policies Committee just wrapped up its work, so I've got an evening free a week probably.
And enough money to hire a first-class
Right, yeah.
survey person for the master plan,
So,
You got 100 grand?
213, I
so.
think.
Yeah, 113.
That'll blow it
Well,
off.
in a pledge of 100.
so before we get into the interview process, Keith, you and I had talked briefly about
Yeah.
some of the applicants they are on other boards, so that would include your committee, if it would be a citizen at large, you have someone. I just want to make sure we don't have to change it.
You've got 4 town board openings, so you've got, and you, 2 of the applicants that are here tonight, one is from school committee, one's from sustainability committee. If you have the EDC on top of that, then you'll have 3 out of 4 town board slots open. And then we still have 2 citizen at large openings, and you've got 1 candidate, 1 applicant for citizen at large who was not able to be here tonight for interview, but who has submitted the application.
So, start the interview process, if that's okay. Gary, you want to come up and? Thank you for volunteering, and I'll just start off, what brought your interest forth on this one committee?
I joined the Sustainability Committee this past year. It's my first time I've been in any kind of town board. My background is with Corps of Engineers. I've been a civil engineer, project manager for the last 26 years, and so I thought I brought some good talent to that board. And when this opening came up, there was a natural desire to have someone from the Sustainability Committee be part of that, because sustainability wasn't even much of a word 10 years ago when it was discussed. It was when the last time you updated this, about 12 years ago or so. And so to bring some of that mindset into it, we all wanted to have somebody participate from the Sustainability Committee, and we looked around the room, and
Here you are.
here I am. But this is the kind of thing I think I'd be good at, and of those who were in the committee, I was willing to step up and take up that spot.
Board, questions?
How's the sustainability committee going?
I don't have much to compare events. I've only been in the committee for like 5 months, but there's a few initiatives that they're trying out, like the water barrel thing. They got recycling that they're going to do in a few months. We're trying to the green communities, and Mr. Bergen has spirited on. So there's a number of things in the hopper.
Nice.
I think it's a fledgling community, though, a fledgling committee.
Yeah.
And so I think I get the sense that I don't have anything to compare it against, but I get the sense that it's still trying to find its place in the structure of the town.
No, I think we'd be lucky to have you. I got my rain barrel. I'm picking it up Saturday.
No, I enjoyed reading what you wrote about the master plan, particularly the previous master plan. I don't have any questions.
Gary, you had mentioned in your notes that you felt that it didn't pervade throughout the community, and as we went through these last 13 years, perhaps didn't inform itself as well as you would like to have seen. How might we be able to improve on that?
Well, I'm neophyte to how town government works and how ordinances work and those kinds of things, but I think from my perspective with my current organization, with an engineering organization, when you have something that you do an after action after some kind of project goes, and you see how it did, if it doesn't get its way back into the processes by which you do things, the same mistakes are going to get made unless they happen to be the same people who happen to work on that previous project and bring it in. So you have to make it part of the system, make it part of the process, and so I would think same types of things. If you have something that is in a master plan that says we should be doing this, unless it gets into, and say you want to encourage, say, green building or sustainability practices, for example, if you don't make it by having tax incentives, or you make it part of some kind of allowance that says you're gonna make it so that you meet some kind of, I'm gonna say quota, but something that says we wanna do this, it's not gonna happen. And so I think, however that works in town government, which again, I'm still a neophyte, making those things into the actual aspects of how you do business, I think is the key.
Thank you.
I think that's it for now.
Okay.
Do we want to hear all the interviews first before we begin the decision?
And we do have more, at this point, we have, sounds like we're gonna have more citizen at-large applicants than we have positions.
No, we only have one. We only have one.
No, you have one citizen-at-large applicant for 2 openings.
Mr. Bielefeld.
And you've got 2 board openings for 4, you've got 2 board applicants for 4 board positions.
Want to make that one?
Gary and Mike.
John's not here, so we got Mike. Hey, Mike.
Thanks, Gary.
With everything to do, why do you want to be on this committee?
We're talking to my wife. Really, my biggest reason for doing it is so Val will stop twisting my arm and my arm will feel better, but, I looked at the master plan and then you can see in some of the notes that I wrote. When I first literally came through Littleton, you could tell it was what people talk about in the past. And as soon as I moved here, I realized that was different than what I had first seen, and it's changed since then. And I think that the pace of change is increasing, and there is a certain inevitability about the fact that Littleton is going to continue to change. I just think it's a good process to go through. I read about this stuff, I think about this stuff, so I'd like to be able to sit down and with other like-minded people and try to have an impact on how we manage this type of transition. Just being more involved.
Questions from the board?
Sold. Nope.
You're in.
Yep.
You're a lifetime member.
Well,
We just can't meet Thursday nights.
Yeah, exactly. I have a standing, every 2 weeks, a standing.
Maybe every other Thursday.
So I just have a question about the second motion here. Does the planning board know we're asking them?
They know and they're not, and they make it to the first joint meeting either, so what you did was you voted to make the appointment subject to concurrence by the planning board.
no. On John's application, he's not here. Do we wait for another opportunity to have him come? Or?
I'd like to talk to him.
Okay, so we'll hold off on that one.
And then you'll be talking to Paul when he submits his, and to Ed when he submits his, so you'll have 3 applicants to interview next time.
Move that the Board of Selectmen and the planning board vote to appoint Mike Fontanella and Gary LaCroix. Mike for the school committee and Gary for the sustainability committee, to indefinite terms on the master plan update steering committee.
Second.
Just the way you said that.
I know.
Should we add the wording subject to the?
Yeah, subject to concurrence by the planning board.
Subjects to the concurrence of the planning board.
Okay, been moved in second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd also move that the Board of
Sounded
Selectmen.
like life with no chance for parole, the way he said it.
It's funny how that works, huh?
Thank you.
Move that, the funny how that works.
All right.
Huh? Funny how that works, he says,
I know,
life
but you
without
said- you
parole.
said us
I was
make a
gonna start,
motion.
I was gonna make the move, and then Mike started talking, so I stopped. The second motion.
Well,
Okay. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote that the planning board provides staff coverage for the meetings of the master plan update steering committee.
seconded.
Motion's been made and second. All those in favor?
Aye. So we're gonna hearing at
The
8 o'clock.
Personnel Board.
We're gonna hearing at 8 o'clock, Mr. Chairman. Can we get this done in 10 minutes?
We might be able to get it done. Sure. In 10 minutes? Sure, thank you.
Good night.
Done 10 minutes, okay?
Just so you know that if it does become 8 o'clock, we'll stop, just open up the hearing and then close up right away. Well, you have some amendments that you've gone through and that you'd like to bring forth to the board?
Yes, there's, two parts to tonight's meeting. One is the word changes that you've gotten a list of that Steve will walk through. And then there is the first, or the presentation of the policy that, this is the part two. We have done the hiring policy, and now I'm going to submit the development policy for first presentation of the first reading, the introduction, I guess. So we want to start on the words?
On the
bylaw
personnel
changes?
bylaw, sure.
Yeah, bylaw.
Let's go through these as quickly as we can. You have the memo? Okay. First two sections, maternity and paternity leave, and new additions to the bylaw. It's basically just saying that we'll follow state and federal law as far as granting maternity and paternity leaves. The only time an employee would be paid for that time is through use of their own vacation, sick, and so on, personal time. The next few sections have to do with step increases. Well, the next section has to do with step increases. On the second page, the proposed language, what we were doing previously was if a current town employee changed departments or went into a new job, that was considered a new position. So according to the way the bylaw was written, they weren't eligible for a step increase. We took another look at that and says, they've been a town employee, they should be eligible for a step increase, as long as they've been with the town for a year. So that's what this language says, is that as long as, if you change jobs, as long as you've been with the town, you're gonna get a step increase come July. And we have an employee now, a new tax collector is in that. She was a school employee for 10-plus years at least. Comes to the town. Under the old bylaw, she would
Since
not
she
be
wasn't here
receiving.
July 1st in the bylaw program, she was not going to be eligible for a step increase come the next July 1st because she did not have a year of service in
In a
that
bylaw
job,
position.
in a bylaw position, but she's been an employee of the town for 12 years.
So that would cover that.
You put in this May, so it is up to the supervisor's discretion to begin with?
No.
Why is the word may receive?
It's
allowed.
It's allowed.
No, it's as long as there is a good performance review. It's the way all step increases are, you have to have a satisfactory performance review.
So it's not it will happen, it may happen.
It may happen.
Okay.
As long as that. And that's what it said.
Just want to be clear.
Yep. The next few sections have to do with the sick leave policy, and that was put in a couple of years ago when we switched from unlimited sick time to what we have currently. These changes were proposed by the Personnel Board, brought to a sick leave advisory group, which was made up of all the union representative from each union and a bylaw employee. It was vetted there. There was a couple of minor changes that the group did, was brought back to the Personnel Board. The Personnel Board adopted all those changes except for one, and I can go through those things quickly here.
And that same list, by the way, we brought back to each of the unions in bargaining, so that we're pursuing it through collective bargaining and the personnel bylaw.
So the first change in the sick leave policy on the top of the next page just adds the same FMLA language that you'll see in the different versions as we walk through the different, the short-term, long-term, and workers' comp sections. It's just that they would be covered under FMLA. The next section, the proposed language, first of all, it eliminates some of the transition language we had as far as awarding of trading in sick days for personal days, so we can get rid of that language. It also deals with a new employee. There was some inequity as to how new employees were treated as far as current employees. They were kind of getting the same benefit, even if they were just here for a short amount of time. So what we did is, if the employee was hired
before December 31st of the fiscal year, and you were able to trade in, and you had used 4 or fewer sick days, you could trade in 2 of those unused sick days for 3 additional days to your short-term disability bank. So every employee has a short-term disability bank now that they can build up with unused sick time. So this gives a new employee the opportunity to begin to build up their bank. They can also trade in, just like every other employee, any unused sick time that they have, 1 for 1 to go into the bank at the end of the fiscal year. Okay?
Now, does it build up year upon year?
It builds up to a max of 40 days.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that in just a second.
Sorry.
It's okay. The next section, prorating sick days. One of the things that we did find in working through this process for the past couple of years is that there was a couple of omissions that we did when we originally wrote it. It just wasn't working out as how we thought it should be. And this section deals with those things. So in the proposed language at the bottom of the next page, it talks about that how short-term disability doesn't apply to workers' comp. There's a new separate workers' comp section. One of the changes that came from that working group was the 1 year of employment. Previously, the bylaw had a 6-month term for employment before this section applied to you. So if you were employed for 6 months, you got hurt, you could claim under short-term disability coverage for the town. We've extended that to 1 year. The unions all had different probation. Their language was at the end of their probation time. Each of the unions had different probationary periods. That group decided that they would allow it to be standardized to a 1-year period. Personnel board agreed 1-year period was fine. Stop me whenever you need to, Jim.
2 more minutes and
Okay.
then we'll come back to you.
At the bottom of the previous page and at the top of the next, talking about the changes. Just to clarify that short-term disability, while on short-term disability, an employee would not be awarded sick, personal, or accrued vacation time, but they'd be able to participate in voluntary benefits such as health, life, and dental. So we spelled out exactly what those benefits would be for those employees. One of the things that, as I mentioned, fell through the cracks was when an employee was out on short-term disability that crossed fiscal years. So say they went out in June of 1 year, they were going to come back until August. We award sick time on July 1st. So because they weren't here July 1st, they missed out on that award of sick time. So they come back from their disability with nothing for the rest of the year. So this section prorates the sick time that they're going to come back to. So we accrue it 1.25 days a month. If they miss 2 months, that's 2.5 days. We give 15, that's 12.5 days that they would get. It also allows them to put that 2.5 days that they missed out on sick time into their short-term disability bank, because essentially it's been brought down to pretty close to zero when they're out on short-term disability. So this gives them a little kicker to begin to build that up.
I gotta stop you.
Okay.
We're going to open a public hearing, and I have a feeling that it won't take too long, so we should probably just conduct that hearing. We have the people here. Board of Selectmen public hearing for entertainment license application for Act 3 Restaurant, 529 King Street, Littleton, Mass. The Board of Selectmen will conduct a public hearing on Monday, March 23rd, 2015 at 8 o'clock in room 103 of the town offices located at 37 Shattuck Street, Littleton, Mass. To act on an application of Gwen Vivian, owner of Act 3 Restaurant located at 529 King Street, Littleton, Mass. For an annual entertainment license pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 181, to allow live music performance Tuesday through Thursday, 6:30 to 10:30, and Thursday through Saturday, 6:30 to 11, and on Sunday, 11:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. at 529 King Street, Littleton, Mass. Comments thereon may be submitted in writing to the Selectmen, the Town Administrator's Office at 37 Shattuck Street, Littleton, Mass. 01460 by noon, Friday, March 20th, 2015, or in person at the hearing. All parties are invited to attend the Board of Selectmen. Keith, did we have any letters?
We did not. We did have the staff recommendations from the building commissioner and the fire chief, both who stated no objection to the issuance of this license. As you know, we've been having an ongoing concern about, under our policy, that the board could only issue 12 entertainment events for the year until there was relief granted by the appeals board of the State Board of Building Standards. That appeal board issued its ruling in favor of the applicant, so the issue that was hanging us up of the whether sprinklers would be required for a nightclub use have been answered by the state, which found that this use does not constitute a nightclub. And so locally, we're all set.
We're all set
with
now.
this, yep.
So,
The fire chief report.
anything, Chief, to add on to that?
Nope, go follow that ruling.
All right. I don't think there's anything. Board?
Move to close the hearing?
Second?
Okay. Motion's been made to close the hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Any discussion?
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 140, subsection 181, to issue an annual entertainment license expiring December 31st, 2015, to Gwen Vivian, owner of Act 3 Restaurant, Inc., 529 King Street, Littleton, Mass., to allow music performances Tuesday to Thursday from 6:30 to 10:30 p.m., Friday and Saturday, 6:30 to 11:30 p.m., and on Sunday, 11:30 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Congratulations.
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 That was a long time.
We'll make you proud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Right. Now back to,
Thank you.
now back to the Personnel Board,
All
right?
right.
Thanks very
Have a
much.
great rest
Thank
of the
you.
evening,
You
and
bet.
we'll see you down the street.
Good luck.
That's right.
You bet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Steve. Back to the,
Back to good stuff.
You're real exciting.
yes.
In section E of that section is the one thing that the Personnel Board did not accept that came back from that group, that working group. The working group had wanted the sick bank to go up to, not the short-term disability bank, excuse me, to go up to 60 days. Personnel Board kept it at 40 days. The reason we kept it at 40 days is we actually had a couple of employees go through the entire short-term disability cycle and found that just as we thought it would, the 40 days was plenty to cover the employee to receive the 100% pay, 60% from the short-term disability, and then backfill with the sick bank days, short-term disability bank days, excuse me. In addition, with the employee coming back and the ability to get those extra sick days, which would replenish their bank a lot quicker, and to give them that differential back to the 15 days was another way to start replenishing the short-term disability bank. So we figured it was no reason to go up to 60 with that. And it's based on our experience that we've had. The next section had to do with long-term disability, had the same language about workers' comp, it doesn't apply. And again, the top of the next page added the same language that we saw, that detailed, not continue to be awarded sick, personal, or accrued vacation time, and detailed the benefits that they were going to get. And again, prorating the sick time, if a long-term disability event crossed fiscal years, when they came back, they will get some sick time awarded to them. One of the, in C, in that bullet item there, wages will freeze at the current step. It's the same intent is there, the wording is different, and in the current language, we talked about seniority. Some of the unions at that meeting felt had a different connotation to seniority as far as longevity and how they stood in the union ranks. It was intended to be wages, so we're switching it to wages. The next section, there's a rewrite of the workers' comp section that will follow Mass General Laws, Chapter 152. And again, the same language from detailing which benefits they'd be able to get and having to do with sick, vacation, and accrued time. The grid, Schedule A, Personnel Board voted a 2% increase to be awarded to bylaw employees. This grid reflects that 2% increase. We're adding 2 more positions to Schedule A, grade 9, zoning assistant, in grade 10, the assistant library director. Those positions haven't been voted before. Schedule B, the election warden, at a straight $16.56 per hour. Park and Rec on Schedule C for their camps and beach employees. There's an entirely new grid and an entire new definition on their employees and where they rank. Park and Rec actually went through, redid all the job descriptions, regraded the job descriptions. Alex and I, as the checkers, spot checked a couple of the gradings on those job descriptions. We agreed with how they were graded for that. We came up with a new grid that was, started with minimum wage at the $9 that we saw that was under on the previous grid. It shaped it up nicely. It's 2.75% going across on the steps. And what was it going down to?
2.75 going down to the grade 4 and then 4.75.
4.75.
Grade
down.
5 onward.
So that there's a little shift in what they consider managers and interns there. And the community ed grid on the final page, again, it was just a change having to do with minimum wage at $9. It was only grade 1 that changed. Grades 2 through 6 remain the same.
The Schedule A positions are, that Schedule A has now been revised in 3 years. That when we brought it to fiscal 2013 to the town meeting back in November of 2012, and the deal for the non-union as well as with the 4 unions and contracts we'd reached was we were implementing a new salary schedule which would exist and be unchanged for 2 years after that. So now we're in the 3rd year afterwards. We're negotiating. We're with each of the unions. We understand the bigger context is that there was over at the schools there was a 3-year deal for 6%, and we're mindful of that. And I guess in the name of looking at 2, 2, and 2 over the next 3-year period, that we're proposing 2% increase for that salary schedule for this first year.
And we did spot check a couple of positions with other towns. That 2% just keeps us current with what's going on in a lot of different towns for different positions.
Has the Finance Committee taken a look at any of this yet? As far as the schedules or all the position ratings?
These are the numbers that were budgeted for.
As of what?
As of
Fiscal
November.
year 16?
Yeah, in fiscal year, the spending
So
plan.
this work was done prior to
body has the money to support
This-
these increases.
okay.
It's
Yeah,
already
implementing
factored
these
money.
raises.
That money is included in 16, which the finance committee has said go.
Right.
Yes.
The spend,
Yes.
right, the
Yeah.
spending plan that we have, the balanced spending plan that we have in place for fiscal 16 includes enough for 2% for the employees.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Maybe just one quick one, out of curiosity. Is maternity leave being unpaid, that's a typical practice in this government, Massachusetts politics? Yeah, got it. Just wondering.
The employee, again, can use their accrued time.
Mhm.
to-
Good to know.
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to support the proposed amendments to the personnel bylaw and classification and compensation plan as recommended by the Personnel Board for Article 10 and May 4, 2015 annual town meeting, including 2% salary schedule adjustment for Schedule A, which was last updated in FY 2013.
Seconded?
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you on that one.
I think that was really easy to understand with the previous and proposed.
Oh, yes, but there's still a lot of, what ifs and questions as to, and it was about the only way to, present it so that you could follow it. Otherwise, you get lost.
I bet.
And those who work on it daily, have
We're
got
still
lost,
going to have Steve.
have got lost in it.
So Steve wants the numbers and wording.
And everything else.
And then the second
Workforce development.
part is the workforce development, and this is, as I had mentioned earlier, the second of two policies that you had asked us to work on, the one being the hiring, the first one being the hiring policy, which was, submitted and approved, and here is workforce development. And basically, I would say if you kind of look at the introduction, what we're essentially saying is we'd like to continue the delivery of excellence in the providing of the service here in the town, okay? And in order, this definition that we're using, it's a strategic approach to ensure the necessary talent and skills will be available when needed, and that essential knowledge and abilities will be maintained. So in that light, a lot of people, would use, hey, it sounds a little bit like succession planning. We're using the workforce development to kind of even be broader than that. We're then kind of saying, how are we going to implement something like this? And it's, there's the 5 points there, is to identify key critical positions. What are the competencies needed for today's job, as well as how we see it moving in the future? What kind of plans are we going to put into place? What kind of goals are we going to set? What kind of money will we set aside? How we, and then we got to document it and keep track of it and evaluate the effectiveness of it. Basically, we're saying that the committee, or the personnel board, as well as the town administrator, will act as a facilitator of helping managers to do this. It's been passed out to I would say, the managers.
All the departments.
All the department managers have looked at it, reviewed it. We didn't, Keith had presented it at his meetings, and so they're aware of what we're saying and didn't provide any additional feedback or resistance.
I thought it was well written.
So it's submitted, as the first reading, and then we go through the process of further reviews.
Yeah, the discussion had started in succession planning, the whole idea of, promoting people from within, promoting skills from within your organization, and we thought it was important enough to actually make a policy statement that it's an important thing, intrinsically, it's an important thing for us to do, invest in our employees. If we're lucky, they'll stay. If we're luckier, we can promote them from within.
And that's our aim, is to develop our own talent.
Questions?
as I mentioned the last time, I'm a huge fan of this. And I like your ideas in making it a little bit broader. One thing you mentioned, actually, looking at other resources necessary to accomplish this. One thing that I'd suggest looking into, and the reality is it might not be feasible, but is software. So I actually have a really good example. HP just went through a tremendous effort to do this sort of thing with over 300,000 employees. And how do you do that when people are leaving and coming and going and all those sort of things? And this software, I think it's called, I forget what it's called, work.com or something like that. But it's really cool. You can, as a manager, you can see all your employees. You click on Melissa and you can see her goals for the year, where she is on track or not, some bio information about them, how they did last year, and it helps twofold. I mean, obviously, the employee has a real clear way of looking at where they are, and their manager can come in and kind of have a look. But also, let's say the manager changes. The new guy can come in and go, okay, here's my team, here's where they're all at. And then another way to look at it is other boards, you're saying get a good pool of talent, right? So what if that's a database of talent available when a new position comes up? You can kind of query and go, okay, who's got these skills? Oh, boom, here's 5 people that I didn't even think of sitting over here. Anyway, I know that costs money. I get that part. But if you really want to do something like this, maybe it's an add-on to an existing software we already have. I don't know, just a thought.
Kind of
Planting the seed.
Thank you.
put a seed in, it's
Maybe we can get a grant from HP.
Absolutely.
Any other comments, questions?
Motion?
Motion?
Move the Board of Selectmen vote to receive a proposed workforce development policy as recommended by the Personnel Board on February 5th, 2015, and schedule the adoption of said policy for the Board of Selectmen's next regular meeting on April 13th, 2015.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Item 6 we've already done. We're moving on to 7A, which is determine the order in which articles appear at our May 4th, 2015 regular town meeting and special town meeting.
Boy. The order in which they appear tonight is the same order that you've seen them now for a couple of times already. For the annual town meeting in particular, it follows the recommendations of from the study committee, and which the board has adopted now for several town meetings. Financial articles first, supermajority next, followed by all others.
Any comments from the board about changing anything?
Looks good.
Looks good.
Seeing none.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the order of which articles appear on the warrants of the May 4, 2015 annual and special town meetings, with financial articles first, those requiring supermajority votes next, followed by all other, including authorizations and reauthorizations, and to direct the constable post said warrants forthwith.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That one carries. 7B.
And we will have execution copies of the warrant for you to sign tonight, so the constable can post them tomorrow. The next motion, 7B, is a procedural motion to refer back to the planning board a proposed zoning amendment, which the planning board is offering. Chapter 40B, Section 5, requires that zoning amendments come to the selectmen, no matter where they come from, and then you submit them to the planning board for a hearing. They're proposing to have the hearing on April 9th on this proposed zoning amendment dealing with non-conforming structures that that's been drafted by town council to conform with the recent court case where the appeals court changed the law a little, and council would like to have our bylaws be consistent with the new law.
Any discussion on this?
Ready?
Ready?
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 48, subsection 5, to refer to the planning board for the public hearing a proposed zoning amendment for non-conforming structures requested by the planning board for the May 4, 2015 annual town meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? May 4th town meetings, adopt article recommendations.
We're a little ahead of schedule right now because we've actually got the town meeting report in an almost final form. We're just awaiting the report from the Finance Committee to include at the end, but we've had all the departments submit their explanations of the articles. We've got a draft set of proposed motions for each of the articles. There are just a few that I would think you'd need to wait on. The zoning amendment one, we would typically wait until after the planning board holds its public hearing. You'd express the desire to have a public information event occur on the stretch energy code first. We're looking at April 7th for that event. You meet on April 13th, and you could vote to adopt a recommendation on that evening after that outreach has occurred. The rest of the financial articles are ones that we've gone over, whether it's operating or capital budgets, borrowings, and so forth. So I think you'd be in a good position tonight to adopt recommendations on a number of the articles because we've already gone through them a couple of times.
So it's essentially 17 and 18.
Yeah, 17 and 18 in the annual, I think you could wait. And we're going to be waiting to fill in the dollar amount on Article 15, the Chapter 90 funds. Those typically don't get issued until April 1st, so we'll know by our next meeting. We can wait on that as well.
To include the 58 grand?
Pardon?
The 58
It'll
grand
be
we just got?
it'll be on top of, it'll be the regular annual allotment on top of the 58 that they just gave us.
Hey, Keith, on the green or stretch energy code and the informational, community informational thing on the 7th, do we have any meetings of the Green Community Committee? What's it called again? I forget.
The Sustainability Committee?
Oh, and we kind of tack onto them. Is that what that's? Yeah, okay. Do we meet, is there a planning before that one that I could maybe?
Oh, sure, I'm sure, I do believe that they're meeting between now and then.
Okay.
I know they met last week, and they've got a number of projects they're working on, so we'd probably have them meet between now and it's the 7th of April.
Between now and then? Okay, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to listen in on that and just help steer if I can.
Can you post those dates on the website, Keith?
Yeah, we will, as soon as we confirm the speaker, and we'll get a room location and all of that.
Thanks,
Hopefully out later this week.
Yeah, because that was zoning article is why I was here. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to support the following articles for the May 4th, 2015 annual and special town meeting warrants and directed preparation of motions to be moved and seconded by said boards. Articles,
Special town meeting.
special town meeting.
You want to do it up this?
Yeah, I got it right here.
You get it?
Yep. 1, bills of prior year. 2, fiscal year line item transfers. 3, snow and ice supplemental appropriation. 4, FY15 capital improvement plan adjustments. 5, water enterprise fund transfers. 6, borrowing Cedar Hill water tank. 7, roadway improvement plan borrowing. 8, 2015 appropriation into blended CPA fund. Annual town meeting. Article 1, town officers. Article 2, annual report. 3, 2016 revolving funds. 4, 2016 operating budget. 5, 2016 water enterprise fund operating budget. 2016, Article 6, 2016 Park and Rec Enterprise Fund budget. Article 7, 2016 capital items from available funds. Article 8, fiscal 2016 community preservation budget. Article 9, fund collective bargaining agreements. 10, personal bylaw amendments. 11, stabilization fund. 12, capital stabilization fund. 13, school trust fund grants. 14, senior veterans tax work-off program. 16, rescind unused borrowing authority. 19, complete streets program. 20, borrowing authorization. 21, compensating balance agreement. 22, 2016 personal exemption amounts.
Moved and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, on 8A, I have to recuse myself, and you'll have to take over, because my company has something to do with this.
Sure thing. So we have 8A is the right of first refusal for Chapter 61B, 1 Wilderness Road on map U10, plot 10-0. We have an opinion from town council?
Yeah, we had the guidance from the Department of Revenue, actually, that because there's no change in use in this 1 acre part of this 2.5 acre property, that we actually don't have a right of first refusal. Nevertheless, the attorneys involved in the sale would like us to issue a notice that we are waiving our right, and since we don't think we have it, it's easy for us to waive it. And so the town council has prepared the form of a document that you can execute where we're waiving our right. So,
About
Questions?
subsequent sales, and if the land was to change use.
if the property, the date would go back to when it came out of chapter, I think there's a 2-year period after which, if a property comes out of either Chapter 61A or 61B, that the right of first refusal, the town has it within a period of years after the change in use happens. So even if change in ownership happens, if a change in use happens, if the property that's kept aside in this case as forest land, if it's to be developed, if it's to be used for some other point, and we're within the window of when we would have the right, then we actually would have to act on a bona fide right of first refusal.
Okay. So by giving up first refusal tonight, we don't limit our opportunities down the road should it change? Okay, that's fair.
Any other questions? We'll look for a motion.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote not to exercise the town's right of first refusal under Mass General Law, Chapter 61B, to acquire a 1 acre portion of the 2.5 acre property at 1 Wilderness Road, Assessors Map U20-10-1, for a bona fide offer of $650,000, and to execute a notice of non-exercise confirming said vote.
Seconded?
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
And there's a form of this document to be signed by the 4 of you. I've got 2 copies. Thanks.
It's all yours, Mr. Chairman.
I didn't even write long, huh? This guy. Do we have anything under number 9? Just the minutes. Just the minutes.
Any comments, questions on the minutes? No? Move that the Board of Selectmen approve the meeting minutes from Board of Selectmen taking place March 9th, 2015.
Second?
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes for March 9th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, subsection 21A, Clause 3, to go into executive session to discuss strategy with respect of collective bargaining with the town unions. Since an open meeting may be detrimental to the effect of the bargaining position of the board, and not to convene in open session thereafter.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Aye.
Scott? Aye. Isabella?
Aye.
Mr. Knox? Aye. Thank you for watching, and we're going into executive session.